breakfast. It's Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk with Matthew Dixon.
Matthew, could you construct a motorbike out of 3D?
You could construct just about anything out of 3D now.
I find this fascinating.
It is fascinating, and the whole concept is about just laying down layer after layer of whatever material you need, and that's the secret here with constructing things out of 3D. We've seen nice little plastic trinkets, Richard, that you put up on your mantelpiece after you've printed them on your 3D printer and you show off to your friends, but that's really just a minor part of it. There are parts that are needed for a whole range of industrial uses. Most aeroplanes, when we used to be able to fly on an aeroplane back in those old days,
what aeroplanes?
Yeah, those things, they had many parts in their engines that were just a little finicky, sort of hard to produce piece, and so they would 3D print those particular pieces.
Stop right there. What is 3D printing? Now, we have a printer here, okay?
Sure.
I go to it, I shove a piece of paper on it, I press copy, and it comes out with a duplicate.
Yep.
What is a 3D printer? A, B, how does it work?
Sure. So when you put assume you've got a laser printer there, when you put that piece of paper in the laser printer, it actually puts a very thin coating of some toner and it presses it into the paper. So that's a layer that it's put down.
Right, so that's that black stuff there.
Yeah, that's right, the black stuff on your paper.
Okay, is that above the surface or embedded?
No, that's above the surface.
It's above the surface.
It's heated into the surface via some fusion there, but a 3D printer effectively does the same thing, except it builds the layers up. So rather than just put one layer on of a piece of paper, a bit of printing.
Like a Lego.
Like Lego, that's right. And it builds, and depending on the type of printer, it builds those layers up. So the plastic one I talked about with some trinkets, you feed in a tube of plastic.
Right, so that you squirt that in the top of the machine?
Well, it comes in a roll and it just sits there and it heats up that plastic and then basically layers it onto a design that you've made on a computer.
So I could draw, say, a donut.
You could draw a donut, you could draw anything three-dimensional.
And I put that where?
You put that into a computer and you connect that to your printer.
Right.
And the same as you have a Word document that you type up and that sends it to the printer, you will do that in a 3D model.
So layers and layers and layers and layers.
Layers and layers.
How many layers?
It depends on the actual device that's being printed and the type of printer and the intricacy you need. So obviously the more layers, the more intricate you can actually make it. So that's the crucial part. But
can you buy one of those printers?
Yeah, they're available. You can get pretty good ones for $1,000. I mean, they're quite incredible.
3D printer for $1,000.
Yeah, that's right. Now you can pay a lot more than that, obviously.
Okay, and are the toners worth more than the printers?
Yeah, that little. So people have actually done things where they'll print pieces of Lego, but you'll pay 20 times the amount for that piece of Lego on the printing.
You might as well go and buy it.
Yeah, that's right. Rather than go and buy it.
So why do we need 3D printers?
Well, what 3D printers can do is Lego's cheap because they build approximately a squillion pieces of Lego a day in the Lego factory. But if you just want to build one thing or something that's a very short print run, then that can be done very effectively on a 3D printer. Or modelling. So for example, car manufacturers now, rather than the old-fashioned method of building the big clay model of a car and then going through the manufacturing process, they can 3D print parts, or in fact the whole car if they need to, very quickly. Once you've got a design on a computer, you can do that. Now they wouldn't mass produce cars in that method, that'd be expensive, but to produce one car, very effective. So that's where 3D printers can be great.
And Matthew Dickinson, they've also produced on 3D printers body parts.
They have started to do that. It's incredible, isn't it?
A heart.
A heart, they've done...
And it functions.
Yeah, and they've done things
How does that happen?
Well, again, it's just anything you can build, anything you can imagine, you can 3D print. It's just about getting the right materials into it. So if something's built out of tungsten, or it's built out of plastic, or it's built out of anything that you can build something out of normally...
So how does a heart get built?
Well, I think they've just used plastics for those hearts that they've been building. So effectively, you could take a heart, but you've got body parts as well, like knee joints, things like
I've
that.
Seen that. Yeah.
Now, we know we can produce a knee joint now, but in the old days, and I'm talking about a couple of years ago, if you were having a knee replaced, the doctor would typically have a number of different options there. So when they pull open your knee and cut it open and take that knee out, they compare that to a few different ones there and say, oh, this looks like the right one, size 7.
Way.
Yeah, that's right, that looks about right.
Yeah.
Now what they do is they take that out, they can scan that, and then they can 3D print one that effectively matches your original body part and then stick that in your knee.
Isn't that good?
Yeah.
A head?
A head. I don't know if they've got to the point where they can
Where's
do a head.
Dr. Frankenstein when we need him? I mean, this is quite amazing, isn't it?
It is, and the problem is we don't understand the brain enough. We don't understand memory.
I don't understand the brain enough.
That's right.
That's certainly true. But I mean, everything's possible. What about a house?
A house sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But that's just actually happened. The first two-story house ever.
You're
It's just
kidding
been
me.
printed in Europe. So the actual
Not a tiny
printer-
house, a
no,
real
a
house.
two-story house. So and the biggest part of that was building the actual printer, because you had to have a printer that was bigger than the house, obviously, to
Is
be
that
able
right?
to build it. So that one actually used concrete, and I watched the video of it. It was fascinating to watch. It just lay down layer after layer. So each layer in that particular example was probably about half the height of a normal brick. So it just laid down layer after layer. On the outside, it looked like a rough cement render, and that's kind of that sort of rustic look. So it actually looked quite good. But each layer that it built, it would actually do some cross members across those almost double brick layers to give it some strength as well. So you build the machine. 15 days of printing was all it took
To build a house.
To build a
A
house.
two-story house.
A
Is it
two-story house.
livable?
It's livable. It's absolutely
Is
livable.
somebody in it?
Someone's not into it. They're using it as a demonstration house at the moment, but there are other communities. So, for example, in Mexico, they're starting to build an entire community in a seismic area that's been
To
hit-
get rid of the shanties.
well, to get rid of the shanties, but also to build houses that if they do get hit by something like an earthquake, they can rebuild a community
Yeah.
quite quickly. So they're one-story houses they're building in Mexico. But again,
Yeah.
in terms of a house, it's individual, flexible, can be done quickly and without labour. So if you haven't got labour available, COVID-19, a perfect example,
Yeah.
you have one person at a computer monitoring. He's not doing anything, he's just monitoring things to make sure, for example, it doesn't run out of concrete to be able to keep
Yeah, but
pumping it through.
who puts it together?
Well, this is the thing. A designer is done. Someone could be sitting in their home, do a design on a computer, send it off to someone and say, "I'd like this house 3D printed. Thanks very much." They put together the printer and then sit back and someone monitors it.
You know, without being too flippant about it, Matthew Dickerson, this 3D building could actually help affordable housing, couldn't it?
Well, absolutely right. Yeah. So, and at the moment, the first one obviously expensive
Yeah.
because they're having to build everything to.
But it's
to try
like
and work
when
it out.
plasma TVs came in. Remember selling those?
Yeah, exactly
25 grand.
Yeah, so as things progress and as they get these more efficient and other manufacturers come along, once one manufacturer starts, competition is wonderful. So more manufacturers come along and then suddenly you've got people competing in that space to 3D print houses. Now, there's still some work to be done by tradespeople. There's still some fit outs to be done inside. So it's not like we're throwing away tradespeople altogether. But in certain areas, I can see this being very efficient. The other thing I like about it, sorry Richard, the other thing I
No.
really like is the ability to have different designs. So it's not just, oh, here's one design, that's it. You could have a row of houses there being 3D printed and you could monitor what was being done and then change the design on each one because you're not having to go through a whole design process again. It's just on the computer, it's changed, the 3D printer, away it goes.
And you say, I'll change that window configuration or the room
Yeah,
configuration.
so you don't end up with this row of houses that look identical. You can
Yeah.
change them very easily.
Which makes it very difficult if you're on the Terps that night and you come home, you don't know which house you live in.
Well,
But how long do they, I mean, houses that they built in the 50s are still in Dubbo now
Yep.
because they're bloody strong, twin brick stuff, good solid Federation houses.
Yep.
How long would a 3D house last?
Well, there's no reason to think it wouldn't last exactly the same length as a normal house. This is a house effectively built of concrete walls. So, concrete doesn't wither away in a few minutes. So
No.
it would be just the same as if it was built out of a normal concrete render.
Okay, now we've talked about things stationary. We have talked about a car. I think they've had a mobile car, haven't they? They've actually inserted an engine. How does a car work, though? Or are we just talking about stationary objects?
No, you can 3D print parts, so that a car can be 3D printed in parts. A car typically, for example, an engine's pretty difficult to print in one go. So you'd 3D print some of the parts, and every car that we drive now would have some components on there that will be 3D printed. That are some intricate, tiny components that are a bit too difficult to manufacture. They would 3D print some of those. So it's quite incredible what's being produced now with 3D printers.
Are we just talking fiction here, or do you think this is the way it's going to be?
Oh, it's already. Forget about fiction, Richard. This is happening right now as we speak. Yeah. So not just in houses, but in lots of things that we do. Apart from the trinkets that you might stick up on your mantelpiece, there are lots of things being used in a practical sense from a 3D printing perspective.
Mind-boggling, isn't it?
Very much so.
Will they replace journalists with a 3D printed?
3D printed version of a journalist? I hope not.
So do I. That's just exciting.
On 2DU Breakfast, it's Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk with Matthew Dixon.